Call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call.
Blunier.
Here.
Leach.
Here.
Lehman. Mennel.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Parrott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
If you join me in Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no public hearings or presentations. Any public comment?
Good evening to Mayor and trustees and the staff. Happy New Year to everyone. Leanne Brown with the Morton Economic Development Council and Chamber of Commerce. Just a couple updates, reminders. We have our upcoming EDC Symposium, which is open to all of our investors, the public, businesses, to join us on Thursday, January 30th at Caterpillar, the Global Parts Distribution Center here. There will be tours available after our annual meeting. It's a breakfast starting at 7 a.m. and you can register either by calling our office or going on to the EDC website. So hopefully you and many of our other citizens and businesses will be able to join us. Also, just another reminder, the Chamber Annual Meetup. This is where we will announce our Distinguished Service Award recipient, our Volunteer of the Year, and then release the festival theme video, and everyone can start to rally around the theme for 2020. So we had some people out filming that last Friday, so if you saw some unusual activity happening downtown, just stay tuned for that video to be released on Thursday, February 6th, out at Burroughs Farms, 4:30 to 6:30. And then just to save the date, we'll be hosting our legislative roundtable with our local, state, and maybe federal representatives on Friday, February 28th here at Freedom Hall. It will be a breakfast starting at 8 a.m. And just a fun wrap-up meeting before the end of the year with Arts Tamales. If you don't know Arts Tamales, they have their production facility in partnership with Yordies, and they will be ramping up again. And you can buy Arts Tamales locally at Lenny's and Susie's Hot Dogs, but then he sells them to about 6 other retailers in our immediate region. So he's excited to ramp up and continue making the famous Arts Tamales. And then lastly, we've sent information out to our investors and businesses, but the Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center, or IMAC as we call it, has launched into the new year with a innovation voucher. It is a matching funding grant up to $25,000. It is to support smaller manufacturers between 5 and 500 employees that are looking to ramp up their technology or production processes. So accelerate technology adaptation, identify and implement productivity improvements, and overcome organizational growth barriers. So we've got all the information in the application. We work with IMAC often, so at the EDC we'd be happy to connect any businesses with that grant opportunity. And with that, I know tonight we're looking at continuing our partnership and just look forward to going into 2020 with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, the consent agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting December 16, 2019, and the approval of the bills. If we could have a motion.
Move approval. Second.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll.
Blunier.
Yes.
Leach.
Yes.
Mennel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrott.
Yes.
Motion passes.
I have nothing tonight. Village clerk,
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
village administrator.
I have one item tonight, Your Honor. It's ordinance 20-23, which is an ordinance making amendments regarding cannabis to Title 12 of the Morton Municipal Code.
Move to approve.
Second.
Do you need to go over this, Council?
I can briefly. This is Julie and I have been working together with assistance from our insurance carrier to update our personnel policies in light of the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. So these are necessary updates consistent with recommendations of our insurance carrier and their retained counsel, and recommendations which I endorse as well.
Any
Question.
Yes, sir.
In here, it talks about not being on village property or in vehicles. We sometimes seize it and we store it in our evidence vault, which is on village property, and we have it in vehicles.
Yeah, and I can, I don't have that specific section in front of me, Chief. Bear with me one moment. The
I believe
intent
it-
certainly isn't to regulate that instance.
I understand, I
Um,
just want to make sure that there's an exempt for that,
Sure.
as well as we store it for training of the canines.
Sure. Not having it directly in front of me, a couple options on this. One is certainly I could work with Chief for minor revisions as kind of a trailer ordinance. I'd suggest it would be appropriate to adopt tonight, and then I'll work with the Chief on his specific concerns and bring back revisions if necessary. It's possible Chief and I, in consultation, may be able to resolve without an amendment, but I think these are concerns are limited, we can resolve.
And basically, in a summary, any employee in a safety position, such as our police, paramedics, are not allowed, it's zero tolerance. They cannot utilize cannabis on or off duty. Anyone, and also our employees who are subject to DOT regulations are also restricted because of the fact that that's a federal regulation. And so the majority of people are going to be restricted on this as far as our personnel goes.
The way I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but under the influence of cannabis, since the state or nobody's really decided on what under the influence means as far as the THC in your blood, that if it's in your blood, then you're deemed under the influence. Is that correct?
No. No, it could be in your system, but not necessarily that you may not be under the influence. Much like alcohol, you can have alcohol in your system without being under the influence of that. And I believe in here it talks of a .08, which is presumption of under the influence of alcohol, and it talks of .04 for some of the THC level under K, under the influence.
Yeah, I see it says the alcohol concentration of 0.04 greater compared to the
Yeah.
BAC, but then the cannabis, looking under section J,
Yeah, there's not been something specifically denoted as what that is going to be.
okay.
But
I guess in terms of this, if somebody comes in and tests positive for THC in their blood, what does that mean?
I would, and we kind of have different places
Yeah, I guess-
where
I
these
guess
rules
maybe-
apply.
maybe, yes.
So from a personnel policy standpoint, based upon the definition, and it would be on in paragraph K of the definition section of the ordinance, under the influence of cannabis would include, as you suggested, Trustee Parrott, testing positive for any amount of cannabis. So in the absence of there being a legislative standard of what is and is not under the influence, for our personnel policies purposes, we are defining it to mean any detectable presence of THC in the blood.
And after discussion with our provider for our random drug testing, their testing procedures are, it comes back positive no matter what the level is, so, at this point.
Any other questions?
Yes, on, under definitions, under item A, where it talks about premises, we make the statement that privately owned vehicles parked or operated on property owned, leased, or managed by the village are also included in that definition. I was wondering, should we then notify our contractors, vendors, and those companies that service the village of this so that they're aware of it? Should we put it in contract documents, or what should we do?
Well, so this is a personnel policy, so regulation, it's employment-based regulation, so if you're not an employee of the village, although our personnel policy says premises includes privately owned vehicles, these regulations wouldn't apply unless you're an employee of the village.
Okay.
Very good questions. Any more? If not, call the roll.
Leach.
Yes.
Mennel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Anything
That's
else?
it.
Chief of Police,
I have nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Corporation Counsel.
Briefly, and I apologize to go back to an item that was voted on, but I want to clarify the statement I last made. I said employees, I overlooked volunteers. It also applies to volunteers in the village, the policy that we just spoke about. So I apologize for omitting that, but I wanted to correct that. Other than that, I have nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Director of Fire Emergency Services.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Director of Public Works.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
And Planning and Zoning Officer.
I have one item tonight, Your Honor. Special use petition 19-11 SP.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And you want to explain what that is somewhat?
So, special use petition was brought forth for 1101 Jackson Street. This is the old La Fiesta building. The special use would allow for food processing, baked goods that would be processed there and then distributed to retail stores.
Any questions? If not, call the roll.
Mennel.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Leach.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Trustee Blunier.
Just one thing, Your Honor. It's Resolution 2720, a resolution establishing funding for economic development purposes.
Could we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is this something that you need to go over or not?
Well, I've reviewed it in advance of action tonight, and I did not have any concerns regarding the language of it. If you're referring to a reading, I'd be happy to do that if anyone requests it, but it isn't strictly necessary.
I've prepared a summary of what it is and what it really means, so, and then afterwards, maybe Trustee Parrott and Julie, maybe you can have a few comments as well, in case I missed something. So, late last year, the question was asked what the annual $55,000 given to the EDC from the village was used for. What specifically does the EDC do with it, and what results have been achieved by the EDC? There was no clear record of what the money was used for, and it was unclear what the results were that were achieved. Mayor Kaufman asked Trustee Parrott, Village Administrator Julie Smick, and myself to meet with representatives from the EDC to gain an understanding of where the money is used. After several meetings with EDC representatives, Sam Hare, Darren Martin, and Mike Witzig, all of us agreed that some changes need to be made, including increased accountability, higher levels of transparency, and communication. It was also noted that it would be useful to have specific duties assigned to the CEO and Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce and her staff. Some of the funds used by the EDC were for projects which the village felt were not core economic development activities or projects. Therefore, the village has requested increased accountability for funding provided by the village. There have been some instances in the past where a new business has had interest in opening in Morton and have decided on a specific location only to find out that they cannot build on that site due to lack of necessary infrastructure or zoning restrictions. Early communication with key village personnel will reduce the likelihood of these types of situations. Communication with the village needs to be enhanced, and we're asking that as soon as interest is shown by a prospective business, that they meet with the Director of Public Works, Craig Loudermilk, the City Administrator, Julie Smick, and the Zoning and Code Enforcement Officer, Brad Marks. We don't want to give the impression that we don't want to bring business into Morton. Yes, we do have zoning restrictions and limits to infrastructure like any town. However, communicating those restrictions up front will create less frustration on the part of the business wanting to relocate to Morton. We're asking the EDC to provide quarterly reports to the village board showing organization oversight to ensure compliance. In the past, many benchmarks were shared which were helpful. However, going forward, the board is requesting specific measurements associated with tasks performed and results achieved. The tasks and the purpose of the EDC need to be clarified and documented as follows. Recruiting new business, filling empty buildings, retaining current businesses, visiting current businesses and making a report after each visit noting that any issue or concern which is village related, such as procedures, infrastructure, codes, utilities, services, etc., are communicated so they can be corrected. Host informational meetings on a regular basis and provide the EDC Organization Committee and the Business Development Committee. Continue to welcome 2 mayor-selected village board trustees at their meetings. Some additional tasks: undertake projects and programs as directed by the village board. Serve in an advisory capacity to the board and the staff in matters pertaining to economic development. Act as a source for business leads. Maintain marketing materials related to village to attract non-residential development. Make recommendations to staff regarding improvements to regulations, zoning, and planning. As previously stated, the EDC is entitled to work on projects as it deems appropriate. However, the village funds should not be used for the following projects. Housing studies. As housing development evolves based on the market needs, the village does not feel there is a purpose to perform a housing study and no funds will be allocated for this. Pocket Park. The Park District has been improving and adding to its park system. We feel it should be the responsibility of the Park District and not the EDC. Wayfinding. This is not considered necessary at this time due to the lack of funding. Bike trails. This will be handled by the village and the Park District as funds are available. After the initial findings regarding how the $55,000 has been spent over the past several years, there were a few trustees that wanted to no longer fund the EDC. A few other trustees wanted to reduce the funding to a level that better matches the true dollar amount needed to support the EDC's mission. We want to meet in the middle by saying that we believe the EDC brings a great value to the village and we want to continue to support their mission. We also are asking for an increased accountability, transparency, and communication in exchange for a slightly reduced funding of $35,000 in 2020. That's all I have.
I feel like I should clap. But that was, I think you did a fantastic job summarizing up, and I'm probably going to struggle to be able to add to that because it was very good. But like Trustee Blunier said, the accountability, the transparency are important, and the communication. We felt like in our meeting, I do want to thank Mike Witzig, Sam Hare, and Darren Martin that formed the committee, and as well as Julie and Rod. They came together and we had great meetings and really had good discussion. And one of the things I kind of felt like I got out of it is we both want the same thing, both the village and the EDC. We want economic development, and I feel like we were, 2 horses pulling in somewhat opposite directions. We were trying to get to the same place, but pulling against each other and working against each other. And my hope and our hope is that with this improved transparency and accountability and the communication, I think communication's probably the biggest of the 3. To communicate what we're doing, both what our expectations are from the board and what the EDC is doing, I think will help us to come together, to work together towards our goals instead of going in different directions to get to maybe the same place.
And about the only other thing I think we need to add is that I think some of the fault lies on our side of the fence also as far as communication and being transparent and working together. So we will work. We have tasks that will be pulled out of this also that we need to make sure that we're on top of everything and making sure that we're putting the effort forth to know that to be able to draw the communication out that we maybe in the past have not done a great job at. So
I agree 100%, and thanks for your comments on that. And we were lacking on our side as well, so we now have a better understanding of what your organization does with the EDC, and so we're here to support you guys in it. So we've learned something as well. So there will be increased communication and transparency, I think, on both sides. So it'll be a real nice team effort going forward, I'm sure.
And I want to thank all 6 of you because I thought we had the right 6 people in the room. Level heads prevailed. I thought I seen some of the paperwork. I want to thank Julie for doing a lot of the organization and paperwork, but as I seen what questions were being asked and what level of interest and accountability, I thought it was 12 years of growth, growing pains. It needed to be done. It's fair, and I think hats off to all 6 individuals for doing the work. It wasn't an easy task. It never is when you ask the difficult questions. So thank you to all. I think it's a good resolution going forward, and it should be a great team effort. But we do have work on our side to do and up front, and communication is big. So
I will add, at the end of this year, what we're voting on tonight is the funding for 2020. And then at the end of 2020 in the fall, I'd like to get back together and look at, okay, what did we learn from this? What do we, and instead of just voting on it every year and just being a status quo thing that nobody thinks about, we want to be on from both sides, both from the EDC side and the village's side, is come back together, in the year and say, okay, what do we need to change? What do we need to do better? What can we do different? Instead of just going for so long, I feel like that, neither side was really necessarily happy with what the other side was doing, but we kind of went so long kind of our own separate ways, and I think that communication and coming back together, I think will be helpful.
Morton wins if we all work together. So that's the bottom line. So.
Oh, and that, the 35,000 isn't a stagnant number, as you mentioned. I think that was the number that we came up with based on what the money, we could recover the information on where the money was used, and we thought that was a solid number. It could go back up if there's documentation on the value that the money is bringing. We certainly want to pour more money into it. So if we spend a nickel to make a dollar in this town, we want to do that, if that makes sense. So.
Anyone else have a comment? Call the roll.
Menold.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Leach.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Do any other trustees have anything? If not, we do have a closed session tonight.
Closed session is requested tonight for 3 purposes. The purpose of discussing the purchase of real property per 5 ILCS 120/2C5, for the purpose of discussing pending litigation per 5 ILCS 120/2C11, and for the purpose of discussing setting a price for the sale of real property owned by the village per 5 ILCS 120/2C6.
Could we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And we'll have to have a roll call on that.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Leach.
Yes.
Menold.
Yes.
We'll adjourn to executive session.